Hi guys, happy Wednesday. I hope you have your yellow on. Today's our yellow day. I was thinking of you guys today when I was getting the yellow out because yellow reminds me of sunshine and you are my sunshine. And the wolf pack brings me sunshine, brings me happiness. So we're going to have a great time today. This video is for our reading lesson and I'm going to read to you a great story about two best friends, which again reminds me of you guys because the wolf pack is a group of best friends. So we're just gonna have a lot of fun reading and listening to this story. So before I start, the story I'm going to read to you is Frog and Toad. And the excerpt from Frog and Toad that we're going to listen to is called The Lost Button. Now, what I really love about Frog and Toad is that it's great for first graders because it a little bit more words, but still those amazing illustrations. And it's written the way Arnold Lobel, the author and illustrator, did, is that he made it look kind of like a chapter book. But each chapter or each excerpt, right, different part, they're a story on their own. They don't have anything to do with each other. They build off of each other. They're just stories about two great best friends. So it makes me think of stories that you guys could write, and they're just so much fun. So Frog and Toad, we know, can talk. Frog and Toad wear clothes. Frog and Toads go on adventures. So before I even start reading, what type of story can you tell this is going to be? Fiction, absolutely. And not just any type of fiction, but fantasy, right? Frogs and toads do not talk. Frogs and toads do not get dressed up in clothes. Frogs and toads do not walk around and go on adventures, right? So fictional stories usually have made-up characters, made-up settings, made-up events that happen and that could never really take place. What I want you to listen for in the story today is that oftentimes in fiction stories, we see dialogue, right? And dialogue is when there's those quotation marks that show us who is talking. So frog might be talking, toad might be talking. There might be other animal characters too, right? And it will show us, the dialogue is going to show us who's talking. And what that dialogue really helps us see is how the characters are feeling, right? If I hear a character say something, if I read a character say something, it helps me understand how that character is feeling. And I'm able to say, oh, well, that's how Toad feels. Let me see how Frog feels or how someone else feels, right? So after I'm done reading this story, I have an activity for you on Seesaw where you're going to tell me what Frog's point of view is and what Toad's point of view is, okay? And one more thing before we start, I know you're anxious to hear Frog and Toad. I have two vocabulary words for you today for you to listen for as I'm reading Frog and Toad. So I have them written on the board behind me: hole and trouble. I'm going to leave those there to remind you that that's what we're looking for. But these are the pictures that are in your textbook that you have at home. So hole, the word is hole. That W is silent. Okay, so this is not like hole, like I have a hole in my sweater. It's a whole different word. And what this means is when something is whole, it is complete. None of it is missing. Whole. The whole barn is painted red. The whole barn is painted red. All of it is red, right? The roof is not. That's a different part. That's not the part of the barn. That's the roof. The whole barn is painted red. Miss Egan ordered a pizza pie, and Jack, Thomas, and Mr. Egan ate the whole thing and didn't leave one piece for Miss Egan. So that means all of it, right? The whole thing. The whole thing. Something else, maybe mom and dad made you a sandwich for lunch and you ate the whole thing. You didn't leave any crust. You didn't leave one bite. Whole. Whole, whole, whole. So that means all of it, right? So we're going to listen for that word whole, and I'm going to leave it right there to remind you. And the other word, the other vocabulary word I want you to listen for today is the word trouble. Trouble. If you have trouble doing something, it means you have problems doing it. This goat is having trouble getting out. So this goat is having a problem, right? He's having trouble getting out. That's because he's trying to go out a hole in a wall instead of going out a door or out a gate or however a goat is supposed to get out of a barn, right? Sometimes puppies get into trouble, right? What would maybe be a reason a puppy got in trouble? What would maybe be a reason a puppy had a problem that they're something that they're doing? Maybe maybe they are trying to go outside and maybe they make an accident before they get outside. They're having trouble, right? They're having trouble trying to do what they need to do. They have a problem. Um, how about if I was outside playing with Jack and Thomas and he hit a ball and the boys hit a ball through the window? Would that be trouble? Did they have a problem doing what they were doing? They weren't supposed to hit the ball through the window, right? That's a problem. What about if you're late to school every day? Is that trouble? Yeah, that means you have a problem getting to school on time, right? How about if you do all your homework? Are you having trouble with it? No, it means you're capable of doing all your homework. So trouble and hole are the two words I want you to listen for as I read Frog and Toad, the Lost Button. So let's start. I'm ahead a few pages here, sorry guys. So the title of this excerpt in Frog and Toad Are Friends is called A Lost Button. I'm going to make some predictions about what I think is going to happen. I see Frog over here has his jacket on, and Toad over here does not. So I'm going to guess one of them lost a button off of their jacket. And I bet they're going to look for it and maybe find it. I think they're going to find it. What's really interesting about making predictions is that you're going to read to find out. So while I'm reading, I might say, ooh, I want to change my prediction. Or I might say, I still think my prediction's correct, but I'm going to keep reading to find out. So remember, I want you to make predictions as we read, and I want you to pay attention to the dialogue happening between the characters so you can figure out what the point of view between Frog is and what Toad's point of view is too. All right, let's read. Toad and Frog went for a long walk. They walked across a large meadow. They walked in the woods. They walked along the river. At last, they went back home to Toad's house. "Oh, drat," said Toad. "Not only do my feet hurt, but I have lost one of the buttons on my jacket." Well, ding, ding, ding. I made a prediction, and my prediction was correct. Toad is the one that lost his button off of his jacket. And I still think my prediction's correct. I still think they're going to find it. But also, listen to what Toad said. Look at that dialogue there, right? "Oh, drat," said Toad. "Not only do my feet hurt, but I have lost one of the buttons on my jacket." What's Toad's point of view there? How does he feel? Oh, drat. Yeah, you can tell he feels upset, right? He's saying, not only do my feet hurt, well, how do you feel when your feet hurt? I don't feel good or happy, right? No way. But I have lost one of the buttons on my jacket. Oh, so Toad has two reasons to be upset. "Don't worry," said Frog. "We will go back to all the places where we walked. We will soon find your button." They walked back to the large meadow. They began to look for the button in the tall grass. So even though Toad was really upset, Frog said, "Don't worry, we will go back to all the places we walked." So he's feeling good. He's feeling happy. And he's saying, don't worry, we'll find it. Not a problem, right, friend? So that's one instance where I can tell by the dialogue how these two characters are feeling. Let's keep listening. "Here is your button," cried Frog. "That is not my button," said Toad. "That button is black. My button was white." And Toad put the black button in his pocket. A sparrow flew down. "Excuse me," said the sparrow. "Did you lose a button? I found one." "That is not my button," said Toad. "That button has 2 holes. My button had 4 holes." Toad put the button with 2 holes in his pocket. They went back to the woods and looked on the dark paths. "Here is your button," said Frog. "That is not my button, cried Toad. That button is small. My button was big. Toad put the small button in his pocket. So far, Sparrow, the bird, has found a button, and Frog has found 2 other buttons. And all 3 of those buttons together are not Toad's button. They're finding all different buttons, but not Toad's button. How do you think Toad is feeling now? Right? We can see here that he said, "That is not my button," cried Toad. Right? If we see it right here. Whoops. "That is not my button," cried Toad. If you're crying, right? What's your emotion? You're really getting very upset. Let's keep reading. I think I want to keep my prediction that they still find it, but I don't know. A raccoon came out from behind a tree. "I heard that you were looking for a button," he said. "Here is one that I found." "That is not my button," wailed Toad. "That button is square. My button was round." Toad put the square button in his pocket. Frog and Toad went back to the river. They looked for the button in the mud. Oh, that doesn't sound like fun. "Here is your button," said Frog. "That is not my button," shouted Toad. "That button is thin. My button was thick." So they already had found 3 buttons, and now Raccoon found another button, and Frog found another button in the mud. And none of these 5 buttons are Toad's button. Frog is still trying to be very optimistic, saying, "Here is your button." But Toad is getting angrier and angrier, and he's getting louder, and he's crying, and he's wailing, and all these different exclamatory words to say how he feels, right? I don't know, guys. Should I change my prediction? Maybe they don't find the button. What do you think? Yeah. Toad put the thin button in his pocket. He was very angry. He jumped up and down and screamed, "The whole world is covered with buttons, and not one of them is mine." What word did we just hear? The whole world. The whole world is covered with buttons, and not one of them is mine. Now, before I keep reading, I really like how the author, Arnold Lobel, wrote this. The whole world is covered with buttons, and not one of them is mine. Does he mean that the whole world is really covered in buttons? No. Toad, or what Arnold Lobel, what the author did, is he's making Toad exaggerate. And that's when you say something, maybe because you're upset, or maybe just to show the way you feel about it, right? So is the whole world really covered with buttons? No. But the way Toad feels is that the whole world could be covered with buttons, and none of them would be his, right? That they're looking and they're looking and they're finding all these different buttons, but not one of them is his. That they could find as many buttons as they want, not one of them will be his. So the whole world, right, the entire world, that's not real. Arnold Lobel had Toad exaggerate there to show us how he's really feeling. Toad is so angry, angrier than he could be, right? So impossibly angry. And because of that, Toad ran home and slammed the door. And there, on the floor, he saw his white, 4-holed, big, round, thick button. "Oh," said Toad. "It was here all the time? What a lot of trouble I have made for Frog." What does he mean by saying, "What a lot of trouble I have made for Frog"? How did he put Frog in a problem? They had a really nice walk in the morning, right? And by Toad saying he lost his button at the end of the walk, they spent the rest of the day, first Toad being angry, right? He wasn't a very good friend the whole rest of the day. He was like, "Oh, I'm so angry, that's not my button." And all Frog was trying to do was help. And Toad made it a problem, right? They were looking and looking and looking, and it wasn't fun, and he wasn't super kind because he was upset the whole time. So what a lot of trouble I have made for Frog. Well, let's listen to how he said that. What's his point of view now? Doesn't sound too upset anymore, right? He's upset that he did that, but he's not upset that his button is missing anymore because now it's not. I wonder what could possibly happen. What would you do if you caused trouble for your friend? You would try and do something nice for them. I wonder if Toad feels the same. Toad took all of the buttons out of his pocket. He took his sewing box down from the shelf. Toad sewed the buttons all over his jacket. The next day, Toad gave his jacket to Frog. Frog thought that it was beautiful. He put them on and jumped for joy. None of the buttons fell off. Toad had sewed them on very well. So what did Toad do? He sewed all of the buttons on that they had found on their adventure, all over his jacket. And he decided to give it to his best friend Toad as a gift for always being a good friend to him and helping him, even though he had caused trouble for him. The end. So I love that story. Let's read a little bit about the author, Arnold Lobel. Arnold Lobel was often sick and missed many days of school when he was young. And when he went back to school, he made friends by telling stories and drawing pictures. I think that's so cool because I think the stories that Frog and Toad tell are exactly the types of stories that you guys could tell, right? You could make that up easy peasy. You are so capable. You know those sight words. You know so many words. This is the type of story that you guys could make, right? Many years later, Lobel's children liked to catch frogs and toads. Lobel loved the animals and wrote about them in his Frog and Toad stories. So his purpose in writing these stories is that he wanted to write about good friends. And they're saying you could write about your friend. Tell how you help each other, right? Frog helped Toad look for his missing buttons, and when Toad realized he had caused trouble for his friend, he helped by making him a present. So I really love that story. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We got to hear our vocabulary words, whole meaning an entire thing, right? And trouble, meaning if you have trouble doing something, it means you have a problem doing it. And I know you won't have any trouble answering my point of view questions about Frog and Toad, and that you will do the whole thing with no problem, with no trouble at all. All right, guys, I'll see you later for math, and I hope you had a great super time reading this story with me. Bye.